The morning fog clung to the cobblestone streets of Whitby like a shroud. The smell of salt and rot filled the air as men and women gathered in the market square, their faces hidden beneath hoods and hats. This was no ordinary market. Here debts were paid in flesh. Here the desperate sold what little freedom remained to them. And here, on a cold November morning in 1842, a young woman stood upon the auction block, her wrists bound with coarse rope. Her name was Miss Clara Ashford. She was 23 years old. Her dress, once fine muslin, now hung in tatters about her thin frame. Her dark hair, matted and unwashed, fell across shoulders that trembled not from cold alone, but from the shame of what she had become. She kept her eyes fixed upon the worn wooden planks beneath her bare feet, refusing to meet the gazes of those who had come to bid upon her labor, her life, her very soul. The auctioneer, a stout man with tobacco-stained teeth, raised his gavel. "What am I bid for, this one, gentlemen?" Young, strong enough for domestic service or field work. Debt of £43 to be settled by purchase of indenture. "Do I hear £10 to start?" Silence fell across the crowd. Clara closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come. Ever since her brother Thomas had vanished into the night 3 months prior, leaving behind debts he could never repay, and a sister with no means to settle them. The creditors had been merciless. First they took the house, then the furniture. Finally, when nothing remained, they took her. £10, called a voice from the back, rough as gravel. Clara's stomach turned. She recognized that voice. Mr. Grimshaw, the butcher, whose hands were always stained with blood and whose eyes lingered too long upon young women who passed his shop. £10 I have. Do I hear 15? Silence again. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. Going once at £10. Her future stretched before her like a dark corridor with no end. 7 years of servitude to a man whose intentions she dared not imagine. Going twice. The gavel began its descent. £100. The words rang out across the square like a church bell, clear and commanding. Every head turned. The auctioneer's gavel froze mid-air. Even Clara raised her eyes, searching for the source of that voice. A man stood at the edge of the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a black greatcoat, with a high collar that framed a face of startling severity. His hair, dark as midnight, was pulled back in a queue that revealed sharp cheekbones and a jaw set with determination, but it was his eyes that held Clara captive. Grey as storm clouds, they fixed upon her with an intensity that made her breath catch. £100, he repeated, stepping forward through the crowd that parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. "I will pay her debt in full, and purchase her indenture for the remainder of the term." The auctioneer stammered, clearly unprepared for such a sum. "Sir, that is, your generosity is most. Might I have your name for the record?" "Captain Nathaniel Blackwood," the man replied, his gaze never leaving Clara's face. The name struck her like a physical blow. Her vision swam, her knees weakened, and she would have fallen if not for the rope that bound her to the post. Captain Nathaniel Blackwood. The man her brother had sworn to destroy, the man Thomas had blamed for their father's ruin and death, the man whose name had been spoken like a curse in their household for as long as Clara could remember. And now he stood before her, offering to pay a fortune for her freedom, unaware that the woman he sought to save was the sister of his greatest enemy. The transaction was completed with brutal efficiency. Documents were signed, coin exchanged hands, and the rope was cut from Clara's wrists. She stood frozen, unable to flee, unable to speak, as Captain Blackwood approached. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice softer now, though still carrying that edge of command. Clara nodded. not trusting her voice. "Good. My carriage waits beyond the square. Come." He did not touch her, did not take her arm as another man might have. Instead, he simply turned and began walking, clearly expecting her to follow. After a moment's hesitation, Clara did, her bare feet silent against the cold stones. The crowd watched them go, whispers rising in their wake. Clara caught fragments as they passed. "Captain Blackwood, they say he's richer than the king himself. Made his fortune in the East Indies, though some claim by means less than honest. Why would such a man purchase a pauper's indenture? Perhaps he has a taste for broken things." The last comment made Clara's cheeks burn with shame, but she kept her head high and her eyes forward, following the tall figure of her unexpected savior, or perhaps her new captor. The carriage was indeed waiting, black and polished to a mirror shine, drawn by 4 matched horses that stamped impatiently against the cobblestones. A footman in dark livery opened the door as they approached. Inside, Captain Blackwood said, gesturing. Clara climbed into the carriage, sinking onto velvet cushions, so soft they seemed unreal, after weeks of sleeping on stone floors in the debtor's holding cell. The captain followed, settling across from her with a grace that suggested both breeding and military discipline. As the carriage lurched into motion, Clara finally found her voice. "Why?" One word, but it contained a universe of questions. Captain Blackwood studied her for a long moment before answering. "Why did I purchase your indenture?" She nodded. "Because no human being should be sold like livestock in a market square," he replied simply. "Because I have the means to prevent such injustice when I encounter it, and because—" He paused, his grey eyes searching her face. "You reminded me of someone I once knew, someone I failed to help when help was needed most." The sincerity in his voice caught Clara off guard. She had expected coldness, calculation, perhaps even cruelty from the man her brother had painted as a villain. Instead, she found something that resembled compassion. "What will you require of me?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Require?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "I require nothing beyond what any employer might ask of a household member. You will serve in my home as circumstances allow. You will be clothed, fed, and treated with the dignity owed to any person in my employ." "I don't understand. You paid £100 for me, that is, for my debt. I paid what was necessary to remove you from that situation. Consider it an investment in human decency rather than a purchase of property." Clara wanted to believe him. Every instinct urged her to trust the sincerity she heard in his words. But the memory of Thomas's warnings echoed in her mind. Nathaniel Blackwood is a devil in gentleman's clothing, her brother had said, his face twisted with hatred. He destroyed father through lies and manipulation. He ruined our family and feels no remorse. If you ever encounter him, Clara, you must remember what he is. A monster who hides his cruelty behind a mask of civility. Yet the man before her showed no signs of the monster Thomas had described. He had not touched her improperly, had not leered or made demands, had in fact shown her more respect in these few minutes than any man had in weeks. Perhaps, Clara thought, Thomas had been wrong about him. Perhaps the hatred that had consumed her brother had twisted his perception until he could see nothing but evil in a man who was merely human. Or perhaps, a darker voice whispered in her mind, Captain Blackwood was simply more skilled at deception than Thomas had realized. "What is your name?" the captain asked, interrupting her troubled thoughts. Clara hesitated. If she revealed her true identity, would he cast her back into the streets? Would his charity turn to anger once he learned she was sister to the man who had spent years plotting his downfall? "Clara," she said finally, offering only her Christian name. Clara, he repeated, as if testing the word. A good name, simple and honest. If only he knew how dishonest she was being in that very moment. The carriage rolled on through streets that grew progressively cleaner and more prosperous. They left behind the grim neighborhoods near the docks and entered districts where grand houses stood behind iron gates and trees lined the boulevards. Finally, they turned through a pair of massive gates bearing a coat of arms Clara did not recognize, and proceeded up a long drive toward a house that could only be described as a mansion. Blackwood Manor rose before them, 3 stories of grey stone with tall windows that gleamed in the weak autumn sunlight. It was beautiful in a severe way, much like its owner. Clara stared up at it, overwhelmed by the realization that this would be her home, her prison, her refuge, she knew not which. The carriage stopped before the main entrance. Captain Blackwood descended first, then turned to offer his hand. Clara accepted it, feeling the strength in his fingers as he steadied her upon the gravel drive. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said. "Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, will see to your needs. You will be given proper clothing, a room of your own, and time to recover from your ordeal before any duties are assigned." "You are very kind," Clara managed, though the words felt inadequate. "I am practical," he corrected. "A person who has been mistreated and starved cannot be expected to work effectively. Common sense dictates that you must first be restored to health." Even his kindness, it seemed, was presented as cold logic. Yet Clara could not help but notice the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, or the care with which he had helped her from the carriage. Perhaps, beneath that stern exterior, there beat a heart capable of true compassion. Or perhaps, she reminded herself firmly, he was simply very good at playing a role. Mrs. Hartley proved to be a woman of middle years, with kind eyes and efficient hands. She clucked disapprovingly at Clara's condition, ordered hot water for a bath, and personally selected clothing from what she called the summer storage, suitable for a young woman of your station. Clara did not correct her assumption about what that station might be. Let them think her a pauper rescued by their master's charity. It was true enough as far as it went. The bath was heaven. Clara sank into water so hot it turned her skin pink, scrubbing away weeks of grime and shame. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a soft robe, she found a dress laid out upon the bed. Simple grey wool, high-necked and modest, but clean and whole and infinitely better than the rags she had worn to the market. A knock sounded at the door. "Enter," Clara called, expecting Mrs. Hartley. Instead, Captain Blackwood stood upon the threshold. He did not enter, maintaining proper distance, but his gaze travelled over her with an expression she could not quite read. "I trust the accommodations are satisfactory." "They are more than I could have hoped for," Clara replied honestly. "Good." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I should explain the situation more fully. This house, my household, operates on principles of mutual respect. You are not a slave, regardless of the legal documents that bind you to service. You will be treated as you deserve to be treated, based upon your conduct and character." "You know nothing of my character," Clara pointed out. A slight smile touched his lips, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his severe features, making him appear younger, almost handsome. "True, but I am an excellent judge of people, Miss Clara. I have wagered my fortune, and sometimes my life on that ability, and my instinct tells me that you are a person of integrity who has fallen upon circumstances beyond your control." The irony of his words struck Clara like a blow. Here he stood, praising her integrity, while she concealed her very identity from him. She was deceiving him with every moment she remained silent about her connection to Thomas Ashford. She should tell him. She should reveal the truth and accept whatever consequences followed. But fear held her tongue. Fear of being cast back into the streets. Fear of losing this unexpected refuge. And beneath that fear, a treacherous curiosity about the man her brother had hated so completely. Was he truly the monster Thomas claimed? Or was there more to Captain Nathaniel Blackwood than the simple villainy her brother had painted? "You are very trusting," she said instead. "Not trusting," he corrected. "Observant. There is a difference." He stepped back from the doorway. "Rest now. Mrs. Hartley will bring supper to your room. Tomorrow we can discuss your duties, but tonight you need only recover." He began to turn away, then paused. "One more thing. If anyone in this household treats you with disrespect or cruelty, you will come to me immediately. Is that understood?" Clara nodded, too moved to speak. After he left, she sat upon the bed, her thoughts in turmoil. Everything she had believed about Captain Blackwood was being challenged by what she had witnessed with her own eyes. He had paid a fortune to save a stranger from degradation. He had shown her nothing but respect and concern. He had promised protection and offered comfort. These were not the actions of the villain Thomas had described. Yet Thomas had never lied to her before. In all their years together, her brother had been her protector, her guide, her only family after their father's death. Why would he invent such hatred for a man who seemed, by all evidence, to be decent and honorable? Unless, Clara thought with a chill, Thomas had not been lying, but had been deceived himself, or unless Captain Blackwood was far more skilled at concealing his true nature than she yet realized. She would have to watch him carefully. She would observe and question and slowly unravel the truth about the man who had bought her freedom, the man her brother had sworn to destroy. And in the meantime, she would keep her own secrets close, revealing nothing of her identity until she understood whom she was truly dealing with. Clara lay down upon the soft bed, exhaustion finally overtaking her. As she drifted towards sleep, one question burned in her mind. What would Captain Nathaniel Blackwood do when he learned that the woman he had rescued, the woman he had shown such kindness to, was the sister of his greatest enemy? Would his compassion survive the revelation, or would she discover that Thomas had been right all along? 3 days passed in quiet routine. Clara recovered her strength with remarkable speed, aided by Mrs. Hartley's excellent cooking and the simple luxury of sleeping in a warm bed. The household staff treated her with cautious kindness, clearly unsure of her position in the house. She was not quite a servant, yet clearly not a guest. Some strange in-between creature that defied their usual categories. Captain Blackwood himself remained largely absent. Mrs. Hartley explained that he kept offices in the city where he managed his shipping interests and other business concerns. He departed early each morning and returned late each evening, often taking supper in his study rather than the dining room. Clara told herself she was relieved by his absence. It gave her time to think, to plan, to decide what she should do about her deception. Yet she found herself listening for his footsteps in the halls, watching from her window for his carriage to arrive, wondering what he was thinking and whether he gave any thought to the woman he had rescued from the market. On the 4th morning, Mrs. Hartley summoned her to the study. "The captain wishes to speak with you," the housekeeper said, her expression giving nothing away. Clara's heart raced as she followed Mrs. Hartley through the corridors. What did he want? Had he learned something about her? Was this where her brief refuge would end? The study was a masculine room, all dark wood and leather, lined with books and maps. Captain Blackwood stood before the window, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. He did not turn as she entered. "Sit, please," he said. Clara lowered herself into the chair facing his desk, her hands twisted in her lap. Finally he turned to face her. In the daylight streaming through the window, she could study him properly for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 30 at most. His features were strong rather than handsome, marked by experience, and she thought by sorrow. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow suggested violence in his past, but it was his eyes that held her. Those grey eyes that seemed to see more than she wished to reveal. "I have been making inquiries," he said without preamble. Clara's blood turned to ice. "About your situation," he continued. "The circumstances that led to your presence at that market." He paused. "I could learn very little. The creditors who held your debt were uncooperative. They would tell me only that you were collateral for obligations incurred by a family member who has since disappeared." Relief flooded through her. He had not learned about Thomas, not yet. "I wish to know more," Captain Blackwood continued. "Not to pry into your privacy, but because I believe you deserve better than the fate you were facing. If there is anything I can do to address the root cause of your misfortune, I would like to try." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her resolve. She was offering help, real help, to a woman he believed to be a stranger. What manner of man did such things? Not the monster Thomas had described. That much was certain. "You have already done more than I could have hoped," Clara said carefully. "I am in your debt." "You are in no one's debt," he corrected, a flash of anger crossing his features. "That is the entire purpose of what I did. To free you from debt, from obligation, from the bonds that society places upon those who have the misfortune to stumble." "Then what am I?" Clara asked. "What is my place in this house?" He seemed to consider the question carefully. "That depends on what you wish to be. Mrs. Hartley could use assistance with the household management, or, if you have other skills, other interests, we might find something more suited to your abilities." "I can read and write," Clara offered. "My father, before his death, ensured that I received an education. I have some knowledge of accounts and correspondence." Something flickered in his expression. "Your father was an educated man, then?" "He was," Clara said, carefully revealing only the truth, never the whole truth. "A gentleman who fell upon hard times, as so many have in these uncertain years," Captain Blackwood mused. "Perhaps, then, you might assist me with my correspondence. I have more than I can manage alone, and my current secretary has proven unreliable." It was an offer beyond anything Clara had expected. To work directly with the captain would give her access to his private papers, his business dealings, perhaps even evidence of the crimes Thomas claimed he had committed, or perhaps evidence of his innocence. "I would be honored," she said. "Good. We begin tomorrow." For now, he crossed to a cabinet and withdrew a small leather purse. "Take this. Purchase whatever you need for your comfort. Clothing, books, whatever strikes your fancy." Clara stared at the purse he placed upon the desk. "Sir, I cannot accept this. You have already done so much." "You can, and you will," he said firmly. "Consider it an advance upon your wages, if that makes you more comfortable. But I will not have you go about in borrowed garments, with no means of your own. Every person deserves the dignity of independence." She reached for the purse with trembling fingers. The weight of coins inside spoke of more generosity than she had ever known. "Thank you," she whispered. "You need not thank me for treating you as a human being deserves to be treated," he replied. "That should be the expectation, not the exception." As Clara left the study, her mind spun with conflicting thoughts. Everything about Captain Blackwood contradicted what Thomas had told her. His kindness, his respect, his genuine concern for her welfare, these were not the traits of a villain. But Thomas had been so certain, so convinced of Blackwood's guilt in their father's ruin. One of them had to be wrong. Either Thomas had misjudged the man completely, perhaps blinded by grief and the need to blame someone for their misfortune. Or Captain Blackwood was far more dangerous than he appeared, hiding cruelty behind a mask of charity. Clara resolved to watch him even more carefully. As his secretary, she would have access to his most private affairs. She would find the truth, whatever it might be, and then she would decide whether she had been rescued by a saint or captured by a devil. The work began the following morning. Captain Blackwood's study became Clara's domain for several hours each day. She sorted correspondence, drafted responses under his guidance, and maintained ledgers of his various business ventures. The work was engaging, far more interesting than she had anticipated. And through it, she learned about the man himself. He was meticulous in his record-keeping, honest in his dealings, and surprisingly charitable. She discovered payments to widows whose husbands had served under him in the Navy, donations to schools and hospitals, anonymous gifts to families facing debtors' prison. None of this fit with Thomas's accusations. None of it suggested a man capable of the ruthless manipulation her brother had described. "You seem troubled," Captain Blackwood observed one afternoon. They had been working in comfortable silence for hours, the only sound the scratch of pen on paper and the ticking of the clock. Clara looked up from the letter she had been composing. "I was only thinking about," she chose her words carefully, "about how little we truly know the people we judge, how easy it is to believe rumors and whispers without seeking truth." His expression grew distant. "You speak from experience?" "My brother," Clara said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "He once hated a man with complete conviction. He was certain of his enemy's guilt, certain that justice demanded revenge." "And was he right?" Captain Blackwood asked quietly. "I don't know," Clara admitted. "I wonder if he ever truly knew the man at all, if his hatred was built on fact or merely on assumption and pain." The captain set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "Hatred is a poison that destroys the vessel that carries it, far more than it harms its intended target. I have seen men consumed by it, turned into shadows of who they might have been. You speak as one familiar with such things." "I am." His voice held a weight of memory. "I once knew a man who blamed me for his misfortunes. He was not entirely wrong to do so. I made choices that affected his life, choices I believed necessary and just, but which brought him ruin nonetheless." Clara's breath caught. Was he speaking of her father? "What happened to him?" she asked. "He died believing me his enemy. And perhaps I was. The world is rarely so simple as heroes and villains. More often we are all simply people making choices with incomplete information and hoping we do more good than harm. Do you regret what you did?" To this man, Captain Blackwood met her eyes, his gaze steady and unflinching. "I regret that he suffered. I regret that circumstances put us at odds. But I cannot regret doing what I believe to be right, even though it cost him greatly." The honesty of his answer shook Clara to her core. This was not a man hiding from guilt or denying his actions. This was someone who had made difficult choices and lived with their weight. "He had a son," the captain continued, his voice softening. "The man I speak of, a boy who blamed me for his father's death, who swore vengeance, he paused, who has every right to hate me, though I hope one day he might understand that I was not the villain he believes me to be. Thomas." He was speaking of Thomas. Clara felt the world tilt around her. He knew. Somehow he knew who she was. "You," she began, her voice shaking. "I know who you are, Miss Ashford," Captain Blackwood said gently. "I have known from the moment I saw you on that auction block." Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Then why? Why did you buy my indenture? Why bring me into your home? Why show me kindness when you knew I was your enemy's sister? Because you are not your brother, he replied simply. Because you bear no responsibility for his choices any more than you bore responsibility for your father's debts. And because he rose from his chair, moving around the desk to stand before her, I hope that you might see what your brother cannot, that I am not the villain of your family's story. You admit you destroyed my father? I admit that my actions contributed to his ruin, but I deny that I did so with malice or intent to harm. Your father, Miss Ashford, was involved in a smuggling operation that cost the lives of innocent men. I, as a naval captain charged with stopping such operations, did my duty in exposing and halting his activities. That his business subsequently collapsed and his reputation was destroyed. These were consequences of his own choices, not of any particular cruelty on my part. That's not what Thomas said. He said you fabricated evidence, that you lied to protect your own involvement. Your brother is wrong. Captain Blackwood's voice remained calm, patient. I understand why he believes what he does. Grief and loss can twist memory, can make us desperate to blame someone, anyone, rather than accept that those we love were capable of wrongdoing. But I swear to you, on whatever honor I possess, that I acted according to law and conscience. Clara wanted to believe him. Everything she had witnessed suggested he spoke truth, but the loyalty to her brother, to the family bond that had been her anchor through so much loss, held her back. Why should I trust you over Thomas? You shouldn't, he said, surprising her. You should trust evidence over emotion. You should trust what you have observed with your own eyes over what others have told you. You have had access to my private correspondence for 2 weeks now. Have you found any evidence of the villainy your brother claims? Any suggestion that I am the monster he paints? Clara thought of the letters she had read, the honorable dealings, the quiet charity, the respect with which he treated all who crossed his path. No, she admitted, I have found nothing. Because there is nothing to find, he said. I am not perfect, Miss Ashford. I am not perfect, Miss Ashford. I have made mistakes. I carry burdens of choices that perhaps could have been made differently, but I am not your enemy. I never was. Then why, Clara's voice broke, why did my father die believing you destroyed him? Because it was easier to blame me than to accept his own guilt. Because admitting wrongdoing, especially when it costs us everything, is perhaps the hardest thing a person can do. Your father chose the easy path. He cast me as villain rather than face his own reflection. The truth of it rang clear as a bell. Clara sank back into her chair, all her defenses crumbling. Thomas, she whispered, Thomas will never forgive you. He will never stop seeking revenge. I know, Captain Blackwood said sadly. And that knowledge is perhaps my greatest burden. Not that he hates me, but that his hatred consumes him, preventing him from the life he might otherwise build. Where is he? Do you know? The captain hesitated. I should not tell you this, but yes, I know where your brother is. I have known for some time. Then why have you not turned him over to the authorities? Surely, with his threats against you, you have cause. Because he has suffered enough, Captain Blackwood replied. Because adding to the Ashford family's pain would serve no purpose beyond petty satisfaction, and because, his eyes met hers, I hoped that one day circumstances might allow for reconciliation rather than continued conflict. You hoped I would convince him to abandon his vengeance. I hoped you might tell him what you have witnessed here, that you might offer him another perspective, one built on observation rather than assumption. The weight of it settled upon Clara's shoulders. He had known who she was from the beginning, had known the risks she might pose. Yet he had taken her into his home, shown her his private affairs, treated her with nothing but respect and kindness, all in the hope that she might be the bridge between him and her brother. the path to reconciliation where direct confrontation had failed. "That is why you purchased my indenture at such cost," she said. "Not out of charity, but as a strategy." "No." His response was immediate and firm. "I purchased your freedom because it was the right thing to do. Everything that followed, the offer of employment, the trust I have placed in you, these are genuine, but," he added honestly, "I will not pretend that I have not hoped for the additional benefit of healing the breach with your brother." Clara looked at this man her brother had called monster and villain. She saw, instead, a person of complexity and honor, someone who had made difficult choices in impossible circumstances, someone who had extended generosity to his enemy's sister with no guarantee of anything in return. "I will speak with Thomas," she said finally. "I cannot promise he will listen, but I will try." Relief flooded Captain Blackwood's features. "That is all I ask, and if he cannot hear it, if his hatred runs too deep, then at least we will know we tried." "There is one thing I must know," Clara said. "If Thomas refuses to forgive, if he continues his threats against you, what will you do?" The captain's expression grew grave. "I will protect myself as necessary, but I give you my word that I will not seek to harm your brother unless he leaves me no alternative. And even then, I will remember that he is your family, and I will show whatever mercy circumstances allow." It was more than she had any right to ask, more than she deserved given her deception. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for my freedom, for the truth, for," she paused, "for seeing me as myself rather than merely as my brother's sister." "You are remarkable, Miss Ashford," he said gently. "In your own right, independent of any family connection. I recognized that the moment I saw you in the market, standing proud despite your circumstances, refusing to be broken by what you had endured. That is why I acted. Not strategy, but simple recognition of someone who deserved better than the fate they faced." His words touched something deep within her. For so long, she had defined herself only through her relationships, her father's daughter, Thomas's sister. Now standing before this man her brother called enemy, she felt seen as herself for perhaps the first time. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Captain Blackwood said, returning to his desk, "you continue as my secretary if you wish, or you are free to leave if you prefer. Your debt is paid. Your indenture, I will have the documents destroyed. You owe me nothing. You would let me go, even knowing I might go straight to Thomas and tell him everything." "Yes," he said simply, "because trust without risk is not trust at all, and because I believe you are a person of honor who will do what you judge to be right." Clara stood, smoothing her dress, her mind made up. "Then I will stay. I will continue my work, and I will arrange a meeting with Thomas, though I know not how he will receive what I have to say." "That is all I can ask," Captain Blackwood replied. "Thank you, Miss Ashford. You have given me something I had not dared hope for. Hope itself." As Clara left the study, she marveled at how completely her world had transformed in a matter of weeks. She had entered the captain's home, believing him her enemy, only to discover that the true enemy had been assumption itself, the stories we tell ourselves about others without seeking the truth beneath. Now she faced perhaps the hardest task of all, convincing her brother to release his hatred and see what she had seen, to understand that the man he had sworn to destroy was not the villain of their story, but simply another person trying to do right in a complicated world. She did not know if she would succeed. Thomas's anger ran deep, rooted in genuine pain and loss, but she had to try, for her brother's sake, for the captain's sake, and for her own sake, because she was coming to realize that the man who had bought her freedom in the market had freed her from far more than mere debt. He had freed her from the prison of inherited hatred. and that was worth fighting for. The meeting was arranged for the following week. Thomas sent word through an intermediary, agreeing to come to Blackwood Manor, though his message dripped with suspicion and threat. Clara spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anticipation, rehearsing what she would say, how she might convince her brother to at least hear the truth. Captain Blackwood went about his business as usual, showing no sign of concern despite the fact that he was inviting his sworn enemy into his home. When Clara expressed worry about the danger, he merely smiled. "Your brother has every reason to hate me, Miss Ashford. But I do not believe he is capable of actual violence, especially not in your presence. And if I am wrong," he shrugged, "then at least we will have tried for peace before resorting to conflict." On the appointed day, Clara waited in the drawing room, her stomach twisted with anxiety. Mrs. Hartley had prepared tea as though this were a normal social call, rather than a confrontation that could end in disaster. The captain sat across from her, reading a book with apparent calm, though Clara noticed he never turned a page. The clock chimed 3. Footsteps sounded in the hall. The door opened. Thomas Ashford stood upon the threshold, and Clara's heart broke at the sight of him. Her brother, once so proud and vibrant, now appeared gaunt and worn. His clothes, though clean, had clearly seen better days. His face bore the lines of someone who had carried too much weight for too long. His eyes, when they found Captain Blackwood, burned with undimmed hatred. "Thomas," Clara said, rising from her seat. He ignored her, his gaze fixed upon the captain, who had also stood, setting his book aside. "You have audacity, I will grant you that," Thomas said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "To summon me here after stealing my sister from that market." "I stole nothing," Captain Blackwood replied calmly. "I purchased Miss Ashford's freedom and returned it to her. She remains here by her own choice, not by any compulsion. So she says in the letter she sent." Thomas spat. "But what choice does a woman alone in the world truly have? You have bought her loyalty with comfort and security. That is no better than holding her captive." "Thomas, please," Clara interjected. "Hear me. Listen to what I have discovered." Finally, her brother's attention shifted to her. "What have you discovered, sister? What lies has this man filled your head with?" "Not lies," Clara said firmly. "Truth. Thomas, everything we believed about Captain Blackwood, it's wrong. Father was not innocent in his ruin. The captain was doing his duty, nothing more. I have seen his papers, his correspondence. There is no villainy here." "No villainy?" Thomas's voice rose. "He destroyed our family. He drove father to an early grave. He left us with nothing, and you defend him." "I defend the truth," Clara countered. "The truth that father was involved in smuggling operations that cost lives, that the captain exposed those operations, as was his duty to do, that our family's ruin came from father's choices, not from any particular cruelty by this man." "You believe that?" Thomas's expression was one of betrayal. "You truly believe he is innocent?" "I believe he is human," Clara said. "I believe he did what he thought was right, just as father did what he thought he must. And I believe that your hatred is destroying you, Thomas. It is eating away at everything good in you." "My hatred is all that I have left," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "Take that from me, and what remains? I have lost my father, my home, my position in the world. If I cannot even cling to the knowledge that someone is to blame, then it was all meaningless." "It was not meaningless," Captain Blackwood spoke, his voice gentle. "Your suffering was real. Your loss was real. But making me your villain does not ease that pain. It only adds to it by preventing you from building a new life." Thomas turned on him, fury evident in every line of his body. "You dare speak to me of building a life? You who took everything." "I took nothing," the captain replied, still calm. "I merely refused to allow illegal activity to continue. If that resulted in consequences for your family, I am sorry, truly. But I cannot apologize for doing what was right." "Right?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "You speak of right as though you are some paragon of virtue. But I know what you are. I have spent years studying you, learning your secrets. You are not the saint you pretend to be." "I have never claimed to be a saint," Captain Blackwood said. "Merely a man trying to do his duty with what honor he possesses. I have made mistakes. I have regrets. But I will not confess to crimes I did not commit merely to ease your need for an enemy." The two men faced each other across the drawing room, years of enmity hanging heavy in the air between them. Clara felt tears sting her eyes as she watched her brother trembling with rage and her unexpected protector standing firm in his quiet truth. "Thomas," she said, "one last attempt. Please, for my sake if not your own, let this go. The man who bought my freedom from that horrible market, who has treated me with nothing but respect and kindness, this is not a villain. This is someone trying to make amends in the only way he knows how." "Amends?" Thomas focused on her again. "Is that what you think this is? Clara, he is using you. Can't you see that? This sudden charity, this convenient kindness, it is all designed to manipulate you into defending him." "You are wrong," Clara said firmly. "He knew who I was from the beginning. He could have left me there. He could have used that knowledge against you. Instead, he offered help with no conditions attached." "There are always conditions," Thomas insisted. "You have simply not yet learned what they are." "Then tell me, Mr. Ashford," Captain Blackwood interjected. "What are these conditions you believe I have imposed? What have I demanded of your sister beyond honest work for fair wages?" Thomas had no answer. The silence stretched between them. Finally, the captain sighed. "I invited you here in hope of reconciliation. I see now that hope was premature. Your anger runs too deep. Perhaps," he glanced at Clara, "in time, circumstances will change, but I will not beg for forgiveness. I do not owe, nor will I accept blame for choices that were not mine to make." "Then we have nothing further to discuss," Thomas said coldly. He turned to Clara. "Come with me, leave this place. We can make a new start together, far from here, far from him." Clara looked at her brother, seeing the desperation behind his anger. Then she looked at Captain Blackwood, seeing the quiet resignation in his eyes. Between them stood a choice that would define her future. She could choose family, could support her brother's hatred and leave with him to build whatever life they might manage together, or she could choose truth, could remain where she had found respect and purpose, even if it meant losing her brother's love. "I cannot," she said softly. "Thomas, I love you. You are my brother and always will be. But I will not abandon truth for the sake of shared anger. The captain speaks honestly. I have seen the evidence with my own eyes. Father was not innocent, and if you continue down this path of vengeance, you will destroy yourself." Thomas stared at her as though she had struck him. "You choose him over your own blood." "I choose truth over comfortable lies," Clara corrected, "and I choose a future built on something beyond hatred. I hope, with all my heart, that one day you will make the same choice. But I cannot make it for you." For a moment, she thought Thomas might weep. His face contorted with emotion, pain and anger, and betrayal warring for dominance. Then his expression hardened into something cold and distant. "Then you are no longer my sister," he said, each word falling like a stone. "From this day forward, Clara Ashford is dead to me." He turned and strode from the room, his footsteps echoing in the hall. The front door slammed with a finality that shook the windows. Clara stood, frozen, the weight of what she had lost crashing down upon her. She had chosen truth over family. Had she made the right decision? A gentle hand touched her shoulder. Captain Blackwood had crossed the room without her noticing, his presence a comfort despite her pain. "You showed great courage," he said softly. "I know what that cost you." "I have lost my brother," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "For now, perhaps, but the door remains open. If he ever finds his way past his anger, he will discover that you never truly closed it. And that," the captain added, "is perhaps the greatest gift you could give him. Not the validation of his hatred, but the hope of eventual reconciliation." Clara turned to him, this man who had changed her life so completely in such a short time. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, his hand still warm on her shoulder, "you continue to build the life you deserve. You work, you heal, you grow beyond the limitations of your past. And he paused, "I continue to hope that one day your brother will see what you have seen. That honor and duty are not the same as villainy, and that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones we make with the best of intentions." Clara nodded, wiping at her tears. She had made her choice. She had chosen truth, however painful it might be. And whatever came next, at least she would face it, knowing she had acted with integrity. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for my freedom, for your honesty, for," she hesitated, "for being exactly who you are, rather than the villain my family needed you to be." Captain Blackwood smiled, a genuine expression of warmth that transformed his severe features. "And thank you, Miss Ashford, for seeing past the stories to the truth beneath. That required courage I am not certain I possess." As they stood together in the drawing room, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, Clara felt something shift within her. She had been bought at a market, freed by a stranger, and ultimately liberated from far more than physical bonds. She had been given the chance to choose her own path, based on evidence and observation rather than inherited grudges. It was more than freedom, it was the opportunity to become whoever she chose to be, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations and hatreds. And standing beside the man who had made that possible, she felt for the first time in years truly free. Months passed. Autumn faded into winter, and winter gradually surrendered to spring. Clara remained at Blackwood Manor, her position as secretary becoming permanent. The work engaged her mind, and the household staff had long since accepted her as one of their own, though with the unique status her relationship with the captain afforded. For it was a relationship now, though neither had spoken of it directly. Something had shifted after Thomas's visit. A barrier had fallen, allowing deeper connection to grow. Captain Blackwood, Nathaniel, as he finally insisted she call him in private, showed a warmth and humor she had not initially suspected. And Clara found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unflinching honesty, his commitment to doing right even when the cost was high. They took walks together in the garden as the weather improved. They discussed books and philosophy over tea. They worked side by side in comfortable silence that spoke of true companionship rather than mere polite coexistence. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Clara's feelings transformed from gratitude and respect into something deeper. Something that made her heart race when he entered a room. Something that made his accidental touches, a hand at her elbow, fingers brushing as he passed her a document, send warmth coursing through her veins. If he felt the same, he gave no sign. Ever the gentleman, he maintained proper distance even as the space between them seemed to grow smaller with each passing day. Then, on a warm May afternoon, word came that changed everything. Thomas had been arrested, caught attempting to sabotage one of Nathaniel's ships. The damage was minor, the attempt clumsy and easily foiled, but the charge was serious, and Thomas faced imprisonment or worse. Clara learned of it when Nathaniel returned home unexpectedly in the middle of the afternoon. She looked up from her correspondence to find him standing in the doorway of the study, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" she asked, alarm rising immediately. "Your brother," he said. "He has been taken into custody for attempting to damage one of my vessels." The world tilted. No, Thomas wouldn't, but even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Thomas would absolutely attempt such a thing. His hatred had never abated. If anything, Clara's choice to remain at Blackwood Manor had likely intensified it. "What will happen to him?" she asked, voice shaking. "That depends on the magistrate, and on me," Nathaniel admitted. "I am the injured party. My word will carry significant weight in determining his fate." Clara stood, her hands clutching the edge of the desk. "Please," she said, "I know I have no right to ask. I know he tried to harm you, but please, show mercy. He is all the family I have." Nathaniel crossed the room to stand before her. Clara, the use of her given name, still knew enough to send a thrill through her. "I have no intention of pressing charges." She stared at him. "What?" "Your brother is angry and hurt. He has been for years. Punishing him further will not heal those wounds. It will only prove, in his mind, that I am the villain he believes me to be. But he tried to destroy your property, to harm your business, and failed," Nathaniel pointed out. "The damage was negligible, hardly worth destroying a man's life over." "No," he shook his head. "I will not press charges. Instead, I will offer him a choice." "What kind of choice?" "I am preparing to send a ship to the West Indies. It is a legitimate trading venture, entirely legal and above board. I need men willing to work hard, but will be paid fairly and given the chance to earn a future. If Thomas agrees to sign on for the voyage, to spend the next year learning an honest trade, I will speak to the magistrate on his behalf." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You would do that? After everything he has tried to do to you?" "I would do it for you," Nathaniel said simply, "because you love your brother despite his flaws, and because," he reached out, gently taking her hand in his, "I have come to care very much for your happiness." The touch of his fingers, so warm and strong, made Clara's breath catch. She looked up into those grey eyes that had once seemed so cold and found them full of tenderness. "Nathaniel," she whispered. "I know this is not the time," he said, "and I know that I have no right, given the complicated history between our families. But Clara, these months with you have been," he paused, searching for words, "they have shown me that life holds more possibility than I had dared believe. You have challenged me, stood up to me when you thought me wrong, supported me when I struggled with difficult choices. You have made me want to be worthy of your regard." "You are worthy," Clara said, her heart pounding. "You have been from the beginning. I was simply too blind to see it. Then perhaps," his hand tightened around hers, "when your brother is safely away and beginning his new life, when the complications of our present circumstances have settled, perhaps you might allow me to court you properly, to see if what I believe I feel, what I hope you might feel, could grow into something lasting." Clara thought of the path that had led her here, from the auction block where she had believed her life was ending, through months of discovery and growth, to this moment where a future she had never dared imagine stood within reach. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." Nathaniel's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Then we have something to look forward to, he said. After we have ensured your brother's safety and future, that comes first. It was so perfectly him, Clara thought, to consider the well-being of his enemy before pursuing his own happiness, to show mercy when revenge would have been justified, to offer her family redemption even when it had been offered nothing but hatred in return. This was the man her brother had called villain, this gentle, honorable soul who valued justice and compassion above personal satisfaction. I will speak with Thomas, Clara said. I will convince him to accept your offer. Only if he truly wishes it, Nathaniel cautioned. I want no more coercion or obligation between our families. If he cannot accept help from me, then we will find another way to ensure he faces minimal consequences. He will accept, Clara said, with certainty. Not because he forgives you, perhaps not even because he wishes to, but because he is my brother, and somewhere beneath all that anger, he still loves me. He will do this, if for no other reason than it is what I ask of him. And so it proved. Thomas, sullen and bitter, agreed to sign aboard Nathaniel's ship. The magistrate, persuaded by the captain's testimony that the damage had been minor and restitution offered, released Thomas into Nathaniel's custody pending the voyage's departure. Clara met with her brother one final time before he left. They stood on the dock, morning mist rising from the water, the ship waiting behind them. I do not forgive him, Thomas said immediately. Do not think this changes anything. I think only that you deserve a chance to build a new life, Clara replied. What you do with that chance is up to you. And you, Thomas's voice held both accusation and hurt. You will remain with him? The man who destroyed our family? I will remain with the man who freed me, Clara corrected gently. The man who showed me that truth is more valuable than comfortable hatred. The man who, she paused, who has offered you mercy when he could have sought vengeance. That is not the action of a villain, Thomas. Surely even you must see that. Her brother looked away, his jaw tight. I see only that I have lost everything. My father, my home, my position, even my sister. You have not lost me, Clara said firmly. I will be here when you return, and I hope, with all my heart, that your time away will give you the chance to see past your anger to the truth that has been there all along. Thomas did not respond. But when Clara embraced him, he did not pull away. It was small progress, perhaps, but it was something. She stood on the dock, watching as the ship prepared to depart. Nathaniel came to stand beside her, his presence a comfort without the need for words. He will come back different, he said quietly. The sea has a way of changing men, of forcing them to confront who they truly are. I hope you are right, Clara replied. And if I am not? Nathaniel asked, if he returns still consumed by hatred. Clara turned to look up at him. This man who had transformed her life so completely, then I will still have made the right choice. In choosing truth over comfortable lies, in choosing you over inherited grudges. Nathaniel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as the ship began to move, carried by wind and tide toward distant horizons. In choosing you, Clara continued softly, I chose freedom, true freedom. Not just from debt or legal obligation, but from the prison of others' expectations and hatreds. You gave me that gift, Nathaniel, and whatever Thomas chooses when he returns, I will never regret accepting it. You honor me, Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. No, Clara smiled up at him. You honored me when you saw a woman on an auction block and chose to see not property to be purchased, but a human being deserving of dignity. That single act of recognition changed everything. As the ship grew smaller on the horizon, as morning light burned away the mist to reveal a clear spring day, Clara felt the final chains of her past fall away. She had been bought at a market by a man she believed her enemy. She had discovered that truth was more complex than family legends suggested, and she had found, in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person, the possibility of a future built on something more solid than inherited grudges and convenient lies. She had found love. Epilogue. 1 year later, the garden at Blackwood Manor bloomed with late summer roses. Clara walked the familiar paths, her hand resting on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. She paused by the fountain, remembering the frightened woman who had arrived here 18 months before, broken and despairing. That woman seemed a lifetime ago. Footsteps on the gravel made her turn. Nathaniel approached, his face lit with the smile that still made her heart race even after 6 months of marriage. "A letter arrived," he said, extending a sealed parchment, "from the West Indies." Clara recognized Thomas's handwriting. She broke the seal with trembling fingers, unfolding the page. "Dear sister," her brother wrote, "I trust this letter finds you well, and the captain also, though it pains me still to acknowledge any concern for his well-being. I write because I owe you honesty, if nothing else. The voyage has changed me. Not overnight, and not completely. But the work, the distance from familiar shores, the forced companionship with men from all walks of life, these things have given me perspective I lacked. I will not lie and claim I have forgiven Captain Blackwood. Forgiveness may be beyond my capacity, but I have come to understand that my hatred served no one, least of all myself. I see now that father made choices that led to our family's ruin. The captain simply revealed those choices to the light. I have secured a position managing a plantation owner's accounts. It is honest work, and I find I have a talent for it. I may remain here another year, perhaps longer. The distance is good for me. The separation allows me to see clearly what I could not when blinded by rage. I hope, when I return, we might rebuild what was broken between us. I cannot promise to embrace your husband as friend, but I can promise to treat him with the respect owed to the man my sister chose to love. Give him my regards, though it costs me much to write those words, and know that wherever my path leads, you remain my sister, and I remain your brother, who loves you despite all that has passed. Your Thomas." Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks as she finished reading. Beside her, Nathaniel read over her shoulder, his arm coming around her waist in silent support. "He may never truly forgive me," he said quietly. "No," Clara agreed, "but perhaps forgiveness is not necessary for peace. Perhaps respect and understanding are enough." Nathaniel turned her gently to face him, his hand cupping her cheek with the tenderness that still left her breathless. "You believed in the possibility of redemption when I had given up hope. You showed me that truth, however painful, is more valuable than comfortable delusion." "We showed each other," Clara corrected, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. As they stood together in the garden, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, Clara thought of the long journey that had brought them here. From an auction block to true partnership, from inherited hatred to chosen love, from the prison of debt to the freedom of truth. She had been bought at a market by a man she believed her enemy, but in the end, what he had purchased with his gold and offered with his compassion was not servitude, but liberation. Liberation from the chains of others' expectations, from the burden of inherited grudges, from the comfortable lies we tell ourselves to avoid confronting difficult truths. And that freedom, Clara reflected as she felt her child move within her and her husband's arms around her, that was worth more than all the gold in England. Sometimes, she had learned, our enemies are not who we believe them to be. Sometimes, the villains of our stories are simply people making difficult choices with incomplete information. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is not fighting for what we have always believed, but being willing to question those beliefs when evidence suggests we might be wrong. Clara Blackwood, née Ashford, had learned those lessons the hard way. But as she stood in her garden, her brother's letter promising future reconciliation clutched in her hand, and her husband's love surrounding her like armor against the world's cruelties, she knew every difficult moment had been worth it. For in choosing truth over comfortable lies, in choosing love over inherited hatred, she had found not just freedom, but home. And that was a gift beyond price. A gift that began in a market square where a stranger saw not property to be purchased, but a human soul deserving of dignity, where a single act of compassion had shattered assumptions and allowed truth to finally emerge from shadow. That was the true story, not of heroes and villains, but of people choosing courage over fear, understanding over anger, and love over the easy comfort of inherited grudges. It was a story worth telling, and it was only the beginning. Did this story touch your heart? Subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage, redemption, and love that transforms even the deepest wounds. Leave a comment below sharing your favorite moment. Was it when Nathaniel first revealed he knew Clara's identity? Or perhaps when Thomas's letter arrived promising hope for reconciliation? Your words inspire us to create more stories filled with emotion, grace, and the healing power of truth. Stay until the end. Another unforgettable journey awaits you.